So these slides are a little bit of a combination of something I present to parents and interested students, but also to build on what JD was talking about in terms of enrollment, donors, and operations and integrity, about how we've handled this relatively new program here at the Ogden Honors College at LSU. It is something that was dear to my heart as a former student at Oxford. And I wish I could say I had all of these Oxford connections that got this program started in the summer of 2017, but that's not true. I literally cold called colleges to find beds, and that is how this program started. So it was sort of an unglamorous start, but we were very lucky to form a relationship with St. Hilda's College, which is located right outside the city center on the River Cherwell. And it is been our home there for 3 summers prior to COVID, and very happily this summer, we're going to go again. It is a small program. We take only 16 students, and we do concentrate our sort of pedagogical goals modeled on the Oxford tutorial system as much as we can, but really it's a very small honors seminar is how we run it. So that's part of what I want to talk about today, is how honors teaching in abroad, and how we can continue that small seminar and incorporate on-site site visits as part of that seminar discussion. So as I said, we're at St. Hilda's College, which was founded in 1893 as a hall for women. So it is a Victorian college. It's one of the more modern colleges at Oxford. And it remained an all women's college until 2008. So it is super fun to go into hall where they eat and see all the different rectors on the walls as women, which is something very different from what they would see at other colleges there. And then you have a picture on the right-hand side of your screen of the great thing we get to do at St. Hilda's, because it's on the river. They get to learn how to punt, and that is actually part of their education. That is part of the requirement. When they go, they have to at least give it a shot or be punted around. And then they all have private rooms because as soon as term ends at Oxford, they sort of move in and they have a private room. So that is also part, I think, of the Oxford experience, is that you have a lot of communal experience, but then you have your own private space. We have our classes in college, and the way I designed this program was that students who would participate would earn 6 hours of honors credit. They would take 2 courses, and the 2 courses that we have run for the past few years are taught in tandem, and they are taught specifically to speak to one another. And I'll say a little bit more about that, because I do think that's one of the things that has certainly been a joy in my participation, but also one of the things that makes this program unique. So they take Honors 2012, which is 19th century ideas and ideals, and they take Honors 2030, ideas and ideals from classical antiquity. I'm a Victorianist, so I teach 2012, and I have the pleasure of teaching with a colleague from UC Davis, who was a former honors professor here at LSU, who teaches the classical antiquity course. And we have 3 weeks over the course of July, and we divide them by weeks. So the first week we look at history, politics, and empire. The second week we look at epic and Odyssey, and the third week we look at education. And those 3 weeks structure both courses. So we do have, as you can see in the picture, we have the ability to be classes on site, but we also take advantage of the grounds as well. So the rationale for this program, when I was talking with my colleague, we really wanted this to be an experiment in the humanities. And so we designed the courses to be taught in tandem and to comment and question each other. And the idea was to think about how we could explore one place in time and how it related to another place in time. So how the Victorians, for example, absorbed, influenced, and redirected the ideas from classical antiquity. And so by hosting this kind of thought experiment at Oxford, we were able to draw on all the advantages of a place where classical ideas have been studied and taught longer than anywhere in the Anglophone world, and also a place that shaped Victorian sensibilities as it stood at the center of Victorian debates over politics, religion, science, the woman question, the Oxford movement, etc. And also how the Victorians took classical ideas, embraced them as their own, and then how, when we move into the modern time in World War I, all of that sort of kind of implodes and gets rethought again. So I've just listed a couple of examples of the things that we do. We look at Pax Romana and Pax Britannia together. We look at how the British rethought themselves as new Romans in their empire building. We look at Jane Austen with Thucydides, which is a joy, and talk about persuasion and the uses of persuasion in the public sphere, as the Romans would have, and in the private sphere. The second week, we read Jane Eyre alongside Homer's Odyssey. And we look at the idea of journey, the idea of the epic hero, and how Jane Eyre might be rethinking what it means to find home, what a homecoming means. And we, in the third week, discuss purposes and goals of education here at this, epic center of education at Oxford, as it was envisioned by Plato, Cicero, and Sophocles, and also Dickens' Hard Times. So in many ways, the first year we did this, we were like, we're not sure this is going to work, but we want to put these things together and see what the students do with them. And that was the great joy of this sort of thought experiment. We let them try to extrapolate how Jane Eyre could be a new Odyssey, and what important differences there were in thinking about Jane Eyre as an Odyssey. I've been very blessed to have over half of, even with this very heavy humanities focus, over half of our participants have been STEM majors. And so part of what we debate is, why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why does this have any value to your major? And we've had some of my most favorite moments have been engineering students debating whether or not they needed to have read Jane Eyre as part of their undergraduate curriculum. And it goes both ways. And sometimes those are fantastically heated discussions. So that has been a great thrill of this program. And also, I think what I've enjoyed doing is sort of modeling the expert as learner behavior in seminar. I mean, I sit with my colleague and he knows far more about Cicero than I do. And so I can ask him questions that, show that I am an educated person asking an expert about their field, and vice versa. He asked me questions about Dickens, and we can model that sort of exchange for sometimes which are freshman students. This is the first summer that they've been at college, and the first summer they're going abroad. Sometimes we throw each other softballs. We do a little prep ahead of our seminars to play off of each other, but a lot of it is spontaneous and great discussion. So that was our program rationale. We, of course, incorporate lots of excursions as part of our class time, and we make it very clear to the students that excursions are class time. So we're able to examine, for example, pre-Raphaelite paintings in person, up close with museum worksheets. We're able to read Jane Eyre and the Odyssey on the grounds of Blenheim Palace. They're able to go to the Charles Dickens Museum. And the idea of adding that to the classroom experience, of course, is invaluable. We take full advantage of Oxford. So we structure our days as sort of morning class time. We do eat breakfast and lunch in college because I do want them to have the sense of what it is like to have been, or to even be in modern times, an Oxford student, this idea of the residential college experience. And then we take the afternoons to do excursions. And again, our excursions are meant to try to tie these two time periods together. So for example, we'll go to the Museum of Natural History and talk about how the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, these artists, these group of sort of radical artists in the Victorian period would have shaped how this museum was shaped, but also how science was presented in this museum. So this sort of conflation of art and science has been a really great joy to experience. So yes, we do go to the things that are close, Blenheim Palace, the birthplace of Winston Churchill. We take them to the Trout Inn and the Godstow Nunnery. And then we go to Bath. And so once again, that's a fantastic site where we can explore the baths, the Roman baths, and think about them as the Romans would have seen them, as an instrument of pleasure, but also as certainly an instrument of imperialism. But then also how they are the setting, of course, of Jane Austen's Persuasion, and how, in the Regency period, this actual physical site was reinterpreted. And that's a lot of fun to do as well. We have a weekend in London because, of course, we want to use all of the sites there that present the antiquities and the Victorian, physical specimens that we can use as teaching sites, but also, once again, to send them into museums and in sites with what we just call museum worksheets. It's sort of a structured scavenger hunt, but they have to, for example, look at the bust of Pericles and think about why it was represented that way. Or they have to, again, look at a pre-Raphaelite painting and think about how color is used as a symbol. And so here is a picture of me in front of the Albert Memorial, and part of their assignment is to read the Albert Memorial. Why would Victoria wanted to have memorialized Albert this way? He's sitting on top of all the great artists and scientists, and for them to really try to read the monument and to look at its location right across from the Royal Albert Hall, and to think about, Albert's great contributions as a man of progress. And then finally, we go on a tour of the Cotswolds. We look at Chedworth Roman Villa, which was this fantastic site of where some sort of amateur Victorians decided to start digging, and they discovered this Roman villa and ultimately destroyed it by their digging. And then they built this lovely little sort of thatched cottage that Dickens, they had all these Victorian tea parties out there. So, I mean, it's a crazy amalgam of two-time places. And then we like to visit the home of William Morris. We are often the youngest people visiting the home of William Morris by many decades, but they are so thrilled that young people know who William Morris is and appreciate both his sort of political thought and his beautiful tapestries. I do build in a free weekend for them. So I think that part of the joy and challenge of study abroad is for students to learn to get around on their own. So one of the things that we do, particularly in London, is we assign students like, okay, we need to get to the Tate Britain. How shall we do that? And they're in charge of getting the group to the Tate Britain. And they learn Oxford pretty quickly. Oxford is small on a grid system, but sort of these other bigger places. It's part of learning transportation. Of course, obviously, we're basically speaking the same language, but to using money, using ATMs, the practical things about those kinds of things. But so they do have free time, and they can explore other parts of England. They can go to the continent. Usually they go to the South Coast. They like to go to Brighton, and certainly they like to go to London. Again, sort of this was for the students. We eat a lot. We eat all the time, and there's lots of different types of ways we eat. We do traditional fish and chips, and we have nice pub dinners, but this is a picture of what Hall in St. Hilda's is like. And I love going to lunch after seminar because it's an extension of seminars. And that's exactly what I think the Oxford sort of spirit is that you continue talking about things that you were talking about in your tutorial. And it's really a nice experience. Again, I'm sorry, these are slides that I show the students just to kind of get them used to how they will travel. Many of them, particularly who are from Baton Rouge, who have not, or from cities like Baton Rouge, where we do not have good public transportation, are not experienced on using public transportation. So part of, again, is how will you get from the Heathrow Airport to Oxford? Let's talk that through, and let's make plans about that. And then the very last thing that I think it's really important for students to feel comfortable is knowing what they're supposed to pack. I guess I can't sort of overemphasize that is a thing that we try to set them up to feel as comfortable as possible when they get there. Because for many of the students, particularly for our students, it is their first real adventure, and some of them are fantastically adept and ready, and some of them are not. And so to try to balance, even with a small group of 16, to balance those different reactions to this learning experience abroad has been something that I've had to learn in my 3 times there. But we have, sort of to answer JD's questions, since we're a small program, we've been pretty okay with enrollment. We'd like to make it kind of a competitive thing to make people who want to go to Oxford, to apply. That was one of the ideas that we've thought about. We are lucky to have a donor, and that also helps with funding, so that the donor is, his his plan is for this to go to need-based scholarships. So we've been able to greatly diversify the types of students who go to Oxford, and that's been a great boon for on every level, for discussion, for bonding, for just broadening everyone's experience. And in terms of operations and integrity, I'm sort of looking forward to this summer going. You know, it's pretty straightforward going to Oxford. So we, in terms of safety, so it's going to be interesting with COVID and those kinds of protocols. We have our program cost is $3,800. That's for, and that covers, I mean, I try to make it as inclusive as possible. So that is 3 weeks, $3,800, most meals. They do pay tuition, and they do pay airfare. So it is an investment. There's no doubt about it. But we do try to work very closely, and Dean Earl is very, very a big supporter of study abroad. So we do try to work very closely to make it, those people who want to study abroad, those students who want to study abroad can. And that's it from me.
The trip to the Galapagos was actually the first trip to Ecuador that I organized here at the University of Toledo. This is a land-based trip, which we do for 2 reasons. One, it's a lot cheaper, and we can keep the costs down for the students, but it also gives you a closer experience with many of the sites. And it isn't just about the land. So we do exciting hikes down into volcanoes, to uninhabited islands to see animals you can't see anywhere else. We have 3 main snorkeling trips on the trip as a whole, and those snorkeling days give us an opportunity to see giant Pacific green sea turtles and nesting nurse sharks and all kinds of fish, seahorses. It's very good snorkeling in several of the areas. The winter break trip, Ecuador, Andes, and Amazon, is a trip across the length of mainland Ecuador to experience amazing biological and cultural diversity. We visit the indigenous communities to understand how they interact with the rest of the world and how their decisions affect preservation of traditions important to them. We hike in high elevation paramo and cloud forests. We visit beautiful colonial cities to appreciate their history. Our 4 days in the Amazon basin give us unparalleled views of the beauty, complexity, and importance of rainforests. Like the Galapagos trip, Ecuador, Andes, and Amazon is open to students of all majors.
Okay, so that just touches on some of the highlights, but the conversations that happen, there are many lectures that bring students, some of the background understanding they need for the environment. And then there are discussions and debriefs in the evening, but it's a pretty hectic pace to fit all of those things in one area. So we usually have a pre-trip, several pre-trip meetings, and then several mechanisms to debrief and process after they've returned to the States. So I think that sums it up for what I wanted to share with you.
Thanks, JD, and thanks for adding me on at the last minute. I didn't think I was going to be able to make the call today. So this is exciting. Just for context, we're not running this program this summer. Turns out when you spend your 20s and 30s digging in the dirt, and you can't go dig in the dirt, you plant a garden and find out you're really good at it. So I'm taking one more summer of tomatoes, letting things figure out what the situation is going to be before we head back. Let me see if I can share this, and I'll just show you a little bit about how we would normally promote this. So this was my slide for 2020. Obviously, this didn't go, but the format, oh, it looks like it's on auto timing from our study abroad fair. I'll just let it roll. This is perfect. If it chooses to go. We run 3 weeks in Israel. The archaeological site is Tel Asafi. It's the biblical city of Gath. So that's Goliath's hometown from the David and Goliath story. It's about 45 minutes from Jerusalem down onto the kind of edge of the coastal plain. And the way that we build this is as an undergraduate research-based program. And this is totally marketed to non-majors. I tell them I don't want you to become an archaeologist. There are no jobs for archaeologists. I got the one job for an archaeologist, and it's in honors. So don't do what I'm doing. But we have been taking honors students. In my previous position at the University of Kansas, we were able to run this, and it was a successful program. And so we asked the students to come, understanding that they're not going to become archaeologists. They come from all majors. And the idea is that they're focusing on kind of basically the essential skills of knowledge work, right? I used to always say the liberal arts, but it really transfers to any field. And that's that they're doing the work of actually excavating. They are collecting 3,000-year-old artifacts. They're the first person to touch it in 3,000 years. I don't come and kick them out of the way. I have enough going on that I can't touch everything. And so they're doing that work of excavation. They're learning how to document this, the paperwork in the field, using the total stations, entering it into the database. And then they're having to write reports for us and synthesize that. And so that's what I tell them, is that no matter what job you take, whether you're in nursing or finance or public policy, you're going to have to take an unfamiliar data set, organize it, and send it back to people in a clear and professional manner. And so we focus on that set of skills for them. And the students have really enjoyed it. So Monday through Friday, they're working full-time on an archaeological excavation. You can see the schedule there. Our weekends are in Jerusalem. And so the way that we set this up is we're actually housed within a research project that's been running for 25 years now from Bar Ilan University. It's the third largest university in Israel. And so for those that have worked with study abroad, they're almost our program provider, if that makes sense, in terms of logistics for housing, food, transportation back and forth from the site. All of that is taken control of by the university, which is an enormous help to me. And it also really inspires institutional confidence. One of the things that I never had university council asking me beforehand, I mean, I've spent the last 10 years diagramming the locations of bomb shelters, but nobody ever asked me, what happens if you get sick? With COVID now, we have to be double deep just to make sure that there's that continuity of operations. But for me, working with people that I've known for the last 15 years, having that university infrastructure there basically was our backstop. If somebody needed to go to urgent care, or if a war breaks out, as happens from time to time in the Middle East, there are resources to take care of us. One of the reasons I love this is that we've, from the Lewis Honors College, in a regular year, we're able to run probably 4 to 5 honors only programs, and they typically all make. These pictures are all from 2018. We ran 4 programs that year to Greece, Paris. We had the grand tour going from London down all the way through Europe into Italy, and then this program. And this one stands out because one of the things I have the students do ahead of time is apply for internal and external funding. So we have some University of Kentucky funding, but because we're doing archaeology in Israel, we have things like the Biblical Archaeology Society, the American Schools that oversees research, the Archaeological Institute of America. And so I had one undergraduate at the University of Kansas, she's the only one wearing a Jayhawk in these pictures, who in her 2 or 3 seasons with us was between $15,000 and $18,000 in internal and external funding as an undergraduate. And that was with conferences and other things. Yeah, I stopped keeping track of it once I came off the job market because it doesn't matter as much anymore. But these students, even if it's applying for an internal grant from the Jewish Studies program to help cover part of their plane ticket, or writing a couple letters, they're gaining another skill in grant writing. And they're also doing some important work in getting rejections for those things. And I think that's an important thing for our students to learn, is that sometimes the grants don't come back. And the same thing in terms of writing the undergraduate research proposals. Sometimes you don't find what you think you're going to find. And so it's been really useful in that way. I think there are 2 huge takeaways for us. One, putting the students on a large-scale international research project with specialists from every background imaginable, and seeing how all these people come together and collaborate to create knowledge. They're very used to reading history as a finished product, but not seeing, how do we take a single pottery sherd from the ground and then turn this into a story. So they get to see that piece. They're learning to work in hot, dry conditions that are uncomfortable, and doing that work. But they're also getting an important cultural piece, right? So a lot of our students, I've been fortunate to do this both in Kansas and Kentucky, which probably plays well to the biblical study sides of this. Everybody knows David and Goliath, even if they're not observant in any sort of way. And that makes it an easy program to sell. But when we get there, these students are probably meeting Jewish friends and Muslim friends for the first time in their life. This is a very common experience for our students. During the week, we're living and working with our Israeli team, but also volunteers from all over the world: Australia, Korea, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, if that counts. And then on the weekends, we stay in the Muslim quarter in Jerusalem. And so actually that picture right there is one of our political science students who sat for 3.5 hours with me, drinking tea and coffee and talking politics with Omar, just trying to learn, just trying to understand the Palestinian perspective. And so it's a really powerful experience for these students when they come into this environment, and any narratives that they've had that are black and white, just they cannot withstand the tension that these students are put in when they start to meet people for the first time and hear their stories. There's where we stay. The rooftop literally overlooks the Dome of the Rock. From an honors perspective, I love that this is interdisciplinary. Here's our students. Actually, our buddy Omar, our students were asking one night, what do Muslims think about when they think about breaking the fast for Ramadan? Ramadan Kareem, for anybody observing, by the way. They're saying, we think of Thanksgiving, we think of mom's turkey or this side dish. What do you think of when you think of the food that you get to eat after a day of fasting? And he said, how many are you? And I was like, oh, we're like 25 people. And he said, okay, Saturday night, 7:30, be here. And that picture that you just saw was all of us crammed into the shop. They turned all the tables over. And so now one of our standing traditions, even if Ramadan doesn't fall during the season when we're there, the students are actually getting to participate in this giant feast prepared by Omar's family, which has just been amazing for us. So what started out originally as a research-based trip has now turned into a very cool intercultural experience that's really exciting for the students. It's really exciting for me, and I hope that's a good overview of this program. I'm really happy to answer questions about it.